Brandt Dodson was born and raised in Indianapolis. It was during a creative writing course in college that a professor said, "You're a good writer. With a little effort and work, you could be a very good writer." That comment and the support offered by a good teacher set Brandt Dodson on a course that would eventually lead to the Colton Parker Mystery series. Brandt comes from a long line of police officers spanning several generations, as was employed by the FBI before leaving to pursue his education. A former United States Naval Reserve officer, Brandt is a board-certified podiatrist and past president of Indiana
Podiatric.
Podiatric Medical Association. It doesn't help that I've lost my voice. He is a recipient of the association's highest honor, the Theodore H. Clark Award. Now, what is that?
Ted Clark was a nice guy. He was very political. He was involved in the Reagan administration and some other avenues trying to promote podiatry. And when he passed on, we named this award for him. And we give us an annual award to the podiatrists in our association we think has done some outstanding service in a lifetime or whatever. We named it after Ted to kind of honor him.
So tell me a little bit about your family and how you went from being a police officer to a podiatrist and a writer in between.
Well, I grew up in a family of police officers. My father and all my cousins and I had some aunts, and it goes back to 1930 on both sides, my mother and my father. So it was just a natural, that was the thing we do. That's the family business. So I actually clerked for the FBI with the intention of going to agent school, and we're on that fast track to do that. And somewhere along the way, I got this wild idea I wanted to be a doctor, which is so strange because I'm not one of these kids that wanted to do it, from the beginning. Applied to med school and I looked at podiatry school and got them both. And then my wife and I sit down and said, okay, let's think about this for a second. I'm not a spring chicken. I was 24 at the time. I'm not a spring chicken. So it's 5-year residency for this and 3 years for that. So we ended up doing podiatry school, and that's how we ended up.
So where did the writing come in?
Boy, that's been something I wanted to do since I was a kid. I remember in 5th grade, our teacher gave us a picture mounted on a piece of cardboard. We all had to write a short story about it. And mine was some kids playing handball in New York. And so I wrote this crazy story about once they start smacking the ball around, that set a timer, and they knew that if they quit playing ball, the city would blow up. And I don't know how I got them out of that mess, but she gave me that first bit of affirmation that you need to do this. And in high school, our English teacher, same thing. She said, if you don't do this, you're going to regret it. And then finally in college, creative writing instructor said essentially the same thing, you're going to regret this. But I didn't. You're told you can't make a living doing that. And so we go on and do these other things, but that was always there. And I decided I've got to do it.
So tell me a little bit about your Colton Parker series and then your newest release, Daniel's Den.
Colton Parker was, he was based on, largely on me and my experience. I said it in Indianapolis because that's the city I know. He's an ex-FBI agent because, and he's what I was before I met Christ. He's a very short-fused, short-tempered, headstrong individual who says, let's don't open the door. It's much more fun to kick it in. That's the way he approaches life. And he's finding that doesn't work for him. Now, he's not a Christian in the books. He doesn't convert. The idea is to let people who are Christian, or maybe people hopefully who are in that boat, who are not a Christian, say, I'm like him. And I understand why things go wrong for him. The latest books, we've done some standalones. Daniel's Den is one we just released in February of 2009, and it's straight suspense. It's about the combustible mix of corrupt politicians and greed and how it can destroy your life. When we wrote that, none of what we hear in the news now was topical, and now it is, but it's always been that way. And it's just a dangerous mix.
So, what do you hope to accomplish through your novels?
I want, when I started writing, and I said, if I'm going to write in the Christian market, I've got to have a purpose. I got to have this is, all corporations do that. And so what I did, I said, I want to write in such a way that I'll direct the reader from my books to God's book. And so in the Colton Parker titles, for example, all of them were biblical titles, 70 times 7, the root of all evil. I hope they read those and say, gee, the root of all evil, the love of money almost destroyed this family. What does God have to say about that? And I wanted to read that. So if I can get them directed back to his book, I've served my purpose.
And did we cover your family? Did we? Can't remember. So how do you balance all that? Being a dad, a husband, writer,
Right.
working
Right.
doctor?
It's not easy. There are times when I come home and I say, I cannot write tonight. I just can't do it. I had a patient that died, and it doesn't happen often with foot conditions. It happened in 2 Kings, King Asa. Apparently he died of a foot problem, but this lady did, and no matter what we did, we amputated one, and we had 2 infectious disease specialists, myself and a vascular surgeon. No matter what we did, we could not get ahead of the infection, and she died. And so I come home that night, and I don't want to write. That's just not something I want to do that night. So, and when I can't, I don't. I don't beat myself up for it now. Family comes second to God, and writing is a third. And as much as I love to do it, it's not my life. And I keep that priority that way. And so if I've got time, I make time to do it. But if I absolutely can't do it, or the battery's not there, I don't do it.
Even if you're on a deadline?
You know, if I'm on a deadline. It's tough. It's tough. But you got to keep your priorities straight.
So how do you handle, say you're ready to write and you're in the zone, how do you handle the interruptions? You don't have small kids, but
Right.
there's still family needs that come up.
They do. The good thing about when I'm in the zone is they pretty much just leave me alone. You know, I'm almost schizophrenic. It'll take me a couple hours to get there. And I remember one scene in The Root of All Evil. We have this confrontation occurring in a black, darkened alley that's rainy, and I'm writing it, and I'm really into this thing. And I look up, and it's sunny outside, and just pulled me out of that flow and just ended it for me. But when I'm in the flow, they leave me alone. My wife has myriad of other interests. She sews and she does a lot of things. My kids have their things. So when it's time to write, I generally know I'm not going to be interrupted, and I can do what I need to do.
When did you start writing? How old were your kids?
Oh, let's see. My oldest one was about 8 or 9. My youngest wasn't even born yet. I sat down. I had just opened my solo practice, just finished residency, and discovered that they don't beat a path to the new doctor in town. So I sat around a lot, and I drove down to the mall, which is a few blocks down my office, and I went to the bookstore, and I saw Dean Koo's book, The Bad Place. And the cover was foiled, and it really attracted me. So I picked up, never heard of him, had never read anything by him, read the first paragraph, and was just intrigued. So I bought the book, took it back to my office, and I read it that afternoon, cover to cover. Within 2 weeks, I read 13 of his backlist.
Wow.
And he reignited that desire to write that had been there all along. And so I started writing. And I started sending stories out. They would come back rejected just as fast as I was sending them out. You know, and that goes on for a while, and you quit. You just think, I don't need this. I can get rejected at home. Like, I put up with this.
Mm-hmm.
But then you start getting nice rejections. They'll say, we really like this, but we
I've got
can't
that
use
right
it.
now.
Yeah, those are golden, because you know you're getting there, getting better. And then I had written a nonfiction piece, which is polar opposite of what I write now. Had driven to the mailbox, and I prayed over it. And I said, you have put this desire in me to write. It's killing me. So if you're not behind this ends right here. If you are, I don't care where it goes, but I just need to know some affirmation, and let the right editor find it. I dropped the mailbox, and it normally takes 6 weeks to hear from them, and they responded in 6 days and said, we want to publish this. And so I knew I was on the right track. And then I wrote a nonfiction book and put it on the ECPA website. That got looked at by a publisher, but didn't pick it up. I thought, I want to write fiction. It's much more fun. It's what I want to do. And we did, and that landed a 3-book contract. So when things started to move, they started to move very, very quickly. But it took 12 years of learning and preparation to get there.
So how is writing with small kids different than writing with big kids?
Well, it's much more time consuming when they're smaller. You've got to put your kids first. You've got to put your family first. I met a writer that who has since ceased to publish, and she told me, she said, when I got my contract, that was the biggest event of my day, more so than my kids being born. And I thought that was kind of a bad statement to make. And she consequently has quit writing. She burned out, and you've got to keep your priorities straight. And those kids are God's charge to you, and you've got to produce good people out of that. And so that comes first. Now, I'm kind of in a position where they don't want to be around me. They've got friends and activities and things, and so this is a golden time for me to write.
So how did you personally keep that in balance? Like, how do you know when you're giving them enough, or they're just being extra, wanting you all the time, or?
And for me, it was a specific incident. I remember writing, and my oldest son was younger than. He said, Dad, let's go to the park. We lived in an apartment, and we had just gotten out of residency, and there was a park across the street. And I said, not right now, I got to do this. And he walked away, and I'm writing. I thought, no, this is not right. So I turned it off, and we went to the park. And then since that time, I've tried to be real cognizant of the fact that when they're in the house, they're families gather around a movie and the TV, or they're playing a board game, so that's where I am.
Right.
And then the writing can wait.
Yes, I'm not really a morning person, but lately I've been getting up before everyone else and crocheting while I'm watching TV because I can't just do one thing. You know, I've got to be,
Multitasking.
yeah, exactly. I read on the treadmill. Let's see. So well, you just pretty much explained my next question. When you feel your priorities switching,
Right.
slipping,
Right.
do you always recognize it right away?
No, I don't. And that's where you gotta be careful. That's where I gotta be careful. I can't say this for everybody, but you mentioned writing in the morning. I have started to do that because that's the time when nobody else is up. That's the time when I can count on, I know I've got it. You can always get up earlier and do your thing. Sometimes at the end of the day, the momentum's carrying on and you can't do it, but you can always get up earlier. But I try to be alert to the fact, even now, even though they're, one's grown and out and the other's a teenager, there's still times he needs my guidance whether he wants it or not, whether he thinks he needs it or not. So I've got to be attuned to that. I've got to spend time with him. And my wife, we married 20 years. You just don't take that for granted. My parents are getting older. There's some, I just got to take a weekend off and I got to drive to Indianapolis and spend time with them. So, but it's amazing how much writing you get done in the morning, lunch hours. I can stand in the shower, get some great ideas, and work them up. So,
As long as you don't check email first and then
That's
get
right.
on Twitter and Facebook.
no, that you open a whole can of worms. That's a great time waster. And I've got to be. There's so many invitations on some of these social networks. You've just got to say no. And I don't have a blog, so that was purposely. I don't want one. That's not my intention. I do post on Facebook on occasion. I'll respond to Kai Lieber, things like that. There's a few, but I don't spend great deals of time on it. I'm there to write when I've got limited time and I've got to produce. Thankfully, I'm a fast writer, so it doesn't take a lot of time, but I try to shut out those things that come in your head and get to work.
So what advice would you give to a writing dad who has their heart set on publication and trying to juggle it all?
Well, that's just it. You got to juggle it all, and keeping all those balls in the air at one time is not easy. If you want to write. This should be something that you don't choose to do. It has chosen you, and you can't get away from it. So if it's a calling, you've got to do it. But you got to keep it in perspective. This is not being the President of the United States. The nuclear war is not hinging on what I say or do. The economy's not going to collapse if I don't sit down at that computer at night. I can spend time with my family. I have that luxury. Barack Obama or any other president doesn't have that. I do. And so I've got to do that. And so any father has to do that. There are times you can carve out in the day. If you can't carve in the day, you carve it out of the week. Get up early in the morning, right in your lunch hour when the kids are in school, right? When they're in bed, that's time. You may have to maneuver things around that schedule. You can't always write when you want to, but you can still get it done. There's a lot of us who are doing it.
Well, thank you for speaking with us today.
Thank you.